if we keep the kingdom at the forefront, we put the flag at the foot of the cross. But if we get drawn into nationalism, we want to drape the flag over the cross, And I think that's a dangerous move. And that changes how we respond. If people out there in our culture are not followers of Christ, they don't have the same responsibility. They don't have the same response to people they disagree with. They're free to hate them. We are not given that option.
In this episode, we talked about current events, especially with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and what demonic powers are at work in the world and what the church's response should be in the midst of all of this chaos. Thanks for listening onto this powerful and important episode on the Disciple Standard Podcast.
The future is now.
Welcome to the Disciple Standard Podcast. My name is Aaron. I'm a pastor here. What did they call me here? I forgot what. The Anchorman. I'm the Anchorman. Hot Wheels Anchorman. I've got a couple different nicknames, and we have for the first time in the podcast, Pastor Kris, the sheriff of Sunlight Community Church.
Awesome to be invited.
Wait. What's the nickname sheriff? I missed it.
They called him. Well, I've called him the warden, and
that
then
was your college nickname.
Yeah,
that's a nickname in college. So he's now the sheriff.
Wow, that's cool.
We need a sheriff here. We need a sheriff in town. And, of course, you've been the pastor of Lake Worth for 10 years now.
Yep.
So down south in Lake Worth, about an hour and a quarter, half an hour. Yeah, hour.
Yeah.
If you're speeding, right? So that's south of us.
45 minutes if you're speeding.
There you go.
We won't talk about that.
That's how you got here so fast.
It's practically impossible to speed on I-95.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess during this time.
I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
You want to know why? Because no matter how fast you are going, people will pass you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's the New York drivers. Well, we got Mr. Multiply here driving fast. So, speeding on 95.
Multiplying the speed limit.
Mr. Multiply, Scott Vanderplug, welcome back to the podcast. Let's start with current events. This last week, I think the whole world is talking about it, and, this is just I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but the assassination of Charlie Kirk left a lot of people, I don't know how they left him, heavy, saddened, angry, all the range of emotions that one can face, especially about a week removed now when we're recording this and watching this back. And I think something happens deep down in us. Like, we don't know how to feel. We've got all these emotions mixed up. And one thing that was interesting, I'm not sure if this was your case in Lake Worth, but here at Sunlight in St. Lucie West, we saw a definite uptick in attendance. There was, I think, about 50% more kids than we usually have in Sunday school. And just by eyeballing the crowd, I'd probably say about 50% more adults, too, in the crowd. Multiple leaders and greeters and volunteers I've talked to have said, we met people for the first time. They haven't been to church in a while, and they just came back specifically because this Charlie Kirk stuff. And it wasn't just the Charlie Kirk stuff. I mean, I don't want to diminish what happened on the train to that young lady or at the school in, I think, Colorado, Anyway, the nation, it seems like the souls of the nation are heavy-hearted, or at least going through something, and everyone is going through feeling different emotions. Some people are like celebrating, some people are those who, I think, who came to church heavy-hearted. What do you guys think is happening? What do you think is happening deep in people's hearts that drives them towards church in times of crisis?
Well, and I think we should note too that the timing was such that it was the 9/11 memorial.
9/11 too, that's right.
So we've got, that always brings up a lot of emotions for people. And at the same time, we have these devastating events like Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I did not see the video, but I know a lot of people did.
Of course.
That it was on social media. And I think that really brought home the violence and the pain of something like that at the same time. So I think, it just raises for so many people because there's so much tension and there's so much polarization, and then it culminates in something violent like that, and it just brings all of it to a head. It brings it to a climax in a way that it's like, oh man, this is not just something in the background. noise of my life that there's this polarization, it's actually coming to fruition in violence.
Right.
And I think people begin to search in the midst of that.
So what does that say about the void of spirituality or the deep need in someone's heart and the inability for them to find and fill that void anywhere else? So they come to church on Sunday. Like it's like, I just feel like I need to connect with God. That was the phrasing that I heard. I just need to connect with God after these past week's events. How, as pastors, should we think through this? Clearly, do we respond to every event out there in the world that causes tragedy? How do we select these events, and how do we decide what to say at these things? Can you walk me through some of your thoughts, maybe Scott or Kris, about how do we think about these events for our congregation?
Well, I have a few thoughts. One is, and I'll just get at my thought by relaying how I found out. I actually found out through my daughter, Kate. Kate says, "Hey, Dad, do you know who Charlie Kirk is?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "He was just shot." And she's the one that brought the news to me. And I'm like, "How'd you hear about this?" She's like, "Oh, all the kids are talking about it."
All the kids?
Yeah. Like immediately with social media, whatever, like all of her peers were all talking about it.
And Kate's a freshman, right?
Sophomore.
So
this is what I have sort of uncovered or discovered, which is I think that if you talk to somebody who, I don't know, is age 50 and above, maybe they will have heard of Charlie Kirk, or they heard about him now and they're just finding out about him. Mm-hmm. So, people might not like it. They may be disturbed by it, but they don't really know. But the younger generation knows completely who he is and what's going on, and I was struck by that. Second thing, and I think this is just a function of our modern media landscape, which is I think every kid down to a very young age who has any awareness of this has seen the video.
Definitely.
I mean, it is all over the place, and that video is shocking.
Gruesome.
It's gruesome. And there's no one who hasn't seen it. So I would say
well, kid.
Okay.
No, these kids will want to watch
I'm
that stuff.
sorry to let you know that you don't fit the demographic.
15.
No, I don't know,
younger.
but I definitely think everybody has seen this gruesome video. So if I was to compare it to like other events, like what assassinations have like rocked the nation? You could think about MLK, you could think about JFK. People have kind of seen the video of JFK over and over, but it's grainy. His head pops back, or I guess it's a controversy about exactly what happens, but it's not so 4K. I see every detail of it in the most gruesome way. Yeah. So I think there's just like a human reaction, a shock reaction to seeing a brutal assassination. And that video is truly not something human beings are wired to see and then just walk away.
And not unlike seeing the bodies falling from the towers at 9/11. I think that
it just shocks you.
Mm.
So I think there's the whole younger generation that is completely tuned in. It's a much bigger deal to them. Like, this is the first assassination of a lifetime for that generation.
Yeah.
Like, where this kind of thing has been so widespread and so known. So I think there's just something in our human heart. Last night in our public reading of scripture, we read through the book of Joel. And of course, the book of Joel, the setup for it is that Joel the prophet, there's just been this huge locust infestation where this swarm of locusts came and just devastated the nation of Israel. And then Joel as a prophet is like, you think that was bad? There's a worse day of God's judgment coming. So that's the message of the book, basically, is like, hey, this miniature difficulty points us to a deeper spiritual reality and the judgment of God. And I think that actually God has set up our world such that there are frustrations, difficulties, and pain. And when we experience them, they are meant to awaken us spiritually to recognize, hey, we're not meant to live without God.
Yeah.
And so there's a natural yearning that happens. Like, the old phrase, there's no atheists in foxholes. Well, all of a sudden you become hyper aware of God if you think you might die in the next 2 minutes. And I think that's the reality of what's going on is people realize, like, okay, I just experienced this horrible, gruesome event, and all of a sudden I sense within me, I should think about God a little bit.
I think with like social media being so in everyone's life for hours at a time, I would have thought that people would be numb to violence because a lot of it could be, so widespread. But for whatever reason, this really shocked people. It shocked me, quite honestly. It was like, I thought I'm numb to violence. I'm just like, I'm like, I've seen it all. I have not seen it all. This was one where it really messed with me and my wife, and we were just like, that's a real person. We've like followed this real person with this real family, and now it's like this. So, what role do churches play in the response to answering, to responding to culture, when people are coming in seeking, guidance or just an understanding, maybe trying to call out to God, or at least trying to see what this man who was a very, Christian, solid Christian brother, evangelist even, he declared Jesus Christ over and over again. Like, so I would assume that's why people are coming to church. What's the church's role? How do we respond?
I think the short answer is the gospel. I think part of what a lot of people took from Charlie and from other, there's so much attention on politics. And I think politics don't have an answer for what happened. Other ideologies, whatever your
That's a big point.
Ideology is out there, there's no answer for what happened in that situation. And I think so people are so attached and so consumed with their particular political perspective or the ideology that they're pursuing, and suddenly they're confronted with something like this, like unspeakable violence, and they run into a wall that their perspective, their politics, their idea that has no answer for it.
It falls flat,
Yeah. And that we as a church, we have the hope of the gospel. And that's what I tried to do on Sunday, was bring up Charlie Kirk and point people to the gospel in the midst of that pain and loss. But also beyond that, the answers that we have for the polarization in our culture, that we are called as followers of Jesus Christ to love people who we differ from. And I challenged our folks to say, every person that we encounter is an image bearer of God. And that changes how we respond. If people out there in our culture are not followers of Christ, they don't have the same responsibility. They don't have the same response to people they disagree with. They're free to hate them. We are not given that option.
They're not our enemy, right? We have an enemy that who we're trying to reach out to.
Yeah. And so we shouldn't be surprised when we see hate in our culture. We should be surprised when we see it in ourselves or in the church.
Sure.
Because that's not who we are.
No. Or our Savior and who we're trying to pattern ourselves after, for sure. Last question probably on this, there's any number of events in the world that could happen, that could cause shock or tragedy. P.S., how do you decide, or how do you think through what to respond to and what not to respond to? Some churches responded to this, some in bigger ways, some in smaller ways. How do you as a church, or how do we as a church think through, okay, what should we say? How should we say it to what events?
Yeah, it's obviously a big question. I think it takes some wisdom and discernment, and we might not always get it right. It's often the case that people walk into church and they're dealing with something and they're hoping that this will get dealt with at church, but the church doesn't deal with it. I mean, that can happen. And that may just be the case sometimes. I think when there are large-scale events like this, it's good for the church to, at least recognize, okay, we know everybody here, we're all going through something, and so let's talk about it. Anyway, let me turn the conversation just slightly too, because I'm thinking about this, which is, it just so happens that along with a couple other people, I have been reading Augustine's famous book, The City of God. And just finished, inside the City of God, there's all these books. And I just finished the 5th book inside. And I just think it's so brilliant. I understand why this book is like one of the towering books. I never read it before. I'm reading it for the first time. More or less what Augustine was dealing with at the time is that Christianity was really advancing, and the Roman Empire started to have a backlash against Christians. And it became very polarized, where they're saying, hey, our empire is declining because all our people aren't worshiping the gods anymore. And so Christians started to be blamed for the decline of the Roman Empire. And that became the occasion for Augustine to write this book. Anyway, it is so brilliant that with each book, you say to yourself, well, I know what happened in Western civilization now. Augustine just has like this takedown of this other viewpoint. And I can see why, like, basically, Christianity just, after Augustine, boom, just took over. And I can see why, because he's so brilliant and incisive. Anyway, in this book 5, he was basically talking about how the entire Roman myths and legends about their gods are so ridiculous and baseless. And if you think about it for 5 seconds, like, it's just a bunch of lies. And he goes on to describe how it's a bunch of lies. And then he does this. He says, you know what? The poets are the ones who first wrote about all these gods, and they knew that they were spewing lies. But then the academics, the philosophers came in, and the philosophers actually knew that the poets were full of it and that what they were saying was wrong. But they thought it was convenient that there would be this religion, and so they decided to leave that alone, even though they knew it was false. But then the politicians came in, and they knew that the philosophers were a bunch of liars and the poets were a bunch of liars, but they found their lies convenient as a way of maintaining their power over the people. And so all three are interested in maintaining these lies, all for different reasons. The poets, because they wanted to entertain, and they found this entertaining. The philosophers, because they wanted to be taken seriously with regard to other things, and they thought that if they cast off this religious thing, they would be kind of downgraded. And the politicians, because they wanted to rule over people with an iron fist. And I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? Not much has changed.
Yeah.
I think actually part of the strong reaction to Charlie Kirk is because we realize that our media and entertainment are like out there pushing all kinds of false narratives. People are really upset at our academies, our universities right now, because they're full of like all kinds of lies and theories, and we send our kids off there and they come back like completely, like we're sending them to become educated, become helpful to the world, and they come back like radicalized in a way. And then the politicians, which are purposely keeping everybody divided, which have all these, like, if you think about it, we must have good people who could become leaders. But our system is set up so that you basically have to compromise and be a terrible person to even get to anywhere. You know, there's so many ways in which you have to compromise your positions for this or that, you know, I don't know. So our media, our academics, our politics, like people feel it's all conspiring against me. And I think that this assassination is like a release valve in that feeling. And for that reason, it's just a much bigger cultural moment than other things that might be like this, because there's a lot of things wrapped up into this one incident. Anyway, go back to your original question. There's no way the church can address every situation that happens, and I don't think it would be a good church if they, hey, let's have a review of the news, and let me tell you what we think about that. That wouldn't be a good church. But there are times in our history or in what happens where if churches don't address this, they're just missing a big opportunity. And I go back to what Kris said. What releases us from this is the gospel of Jesus. And that is what needs to, people who are sensing, man, there's darkness in the world and it's difficult. And, you know, if I go back to what I said about Joel, like, okay, hey, there is a God and we can't live without him. All these things, they all come together. We need to know there's good news that God sent his son Jesus. He's reconciling us to God and everything else in the world. He's putting it all back together and we can trust him. And he works everything to the good. Yeah, this was horrible, but God already is starting to do good things in many people's lives as a result. And I think all that good news is what really needs to be told.
If I could just add one little thing to that. I think it segues from what Scott's saying. I've been wrestling with this week because there were some people, I think, who were disappointed that I didn't say more. You know, I did talk about it, but they wanted me to say more in defense of Charlie. And they want me, I think, in some ways to bring up more of the issues that Charlie brings to light. And I've been reflecting on, you know, Jesus' life and ministry. And I was trying to think how many, and you guys can correct me on this, but how many times did Jesus bring up current events and the issues of the day? And I really came to this conclusion. There are moments, you know, they're constantly trying to drag him into it.
Yeah.
Do we pay taxes? You know, and there was one moment where he says, do you think that moment where the tower fell on those
Right.
people, that they're worse, more guilty than you are? So he brings it back.
Yeah.
He addresses a contemporary event, but then he brings it back. So my point is, I think Jesus, his primary focus is the kingdom of God. It's the gospel. It's the big picture. It's not all of these events that are happening. He might address them briefly, but he brings it back. Even with the paying taxes to Caesar, it's give to God what is God's. In other words, you're image bearers. Give your whole self to God.
Yeah.
Well, this is a reason we don't want to get drug into the news cycle.
Yep.
Because actually, the media, academics, politics, these are all the weapons that are being used to drag people down, to pull them apart, to keep them from truth. And I agree with you. We're trying to point out the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the city of God, not just get dragged down to become part of the city of man, as Augustine would put it. Our culture is full of lies. It's full of wars and deceit and dragging people down and you're my enemy, so I have to destroy you. And no.
Yeah. And it's driven by anger and fear because
Yeah.
that's what gets the most likes. That's what gets the most ratings. It's driven by anger and fear. And we're driven by something very different.
Yeah. But to be really forthright about these kinds of things, I think that is, look, everybody, aren't you tired of this?
Yeah.
Here's the light of Christ that draws us to something. We should not be driven by anger and fear. We should be driven by love and peace and a kind of wholehearted faith that has experienced grace. Like, the reason I don't have so much anger and fear is I know what I was capable of and what I've been saved from. And like, I'm not looking down my nose at anybody out there. I got rescued. I'd love for other people to join me here in the rescue boat.
There's a lot for me to chew on here, guys. I'm learning a lot from you guys right now.
And this isn't the topic that we sat down to talk about.
I'm just thinking about, I have three things here. The first was when, Kris, you said we're driven by anger and fear. I think also, or the media is driven by anger and fear. For myself, I like that, right? Like my heart kind of clings like, yeah, I am angry. Or, yeah, they need to be fear. Like I want to jump on that boat. It's not that I don't want any part of that. There's a sinful nature in here that part of me likes that. Part of me wants to be angry.
And there's kernels of truth to it.
Yeah, there is, right? There is. And we're called to a higher ground, or we're called to a higher motive than anger, fear. So I could see why people would either just kind of go along with that, especially if they don't have the gospel, right? So what do they have? They have, like you said, their religion is their politics or their party or whatever. And so that becomes their religion, and it'll fall short. It'll fall flat. They'll hit a wall, as you said, when these things happen. The second thing was this idea that you bring up with the city of God. I thought that was pretty profound. I'm just chewing on that right now.
Let me jump in with something else about it then, too.
Okay.
This is, hot take, controversial maybe. So one of the things that I've been surprised by, so Augustine, he's responding. People are saying, hey, the reason that the Roman Empire is in decline is because we've abandoned these ancient gods. Augustine, he comes out and he is so crystal clear. He is like, these so-called gods, they're demons. And these demons have been holding you in like chains of darkness that you need to be released from. So he takes all the gods of Rome and he's basically like, these are horrible demons. And then he starts saying, okay, and here are their lies and here is their deceit. Well, anyway, I've sort of been challenged by that a little bit because it's just interesting to hear from Augustine's, perspective in the 4th century as he looks at what's going on in the broader Roman culture, being like, you know what? This is being fueled by demons. And I think we're too quick today, whether it's the Enlightenment or whatever, to discount the demonic forces that are at work. And, I just mentioned kind of already what Augustine mentioned, our media, our academies, university, our politics. I think there is a way in which demonic forces, they want people to be opposed to each other. They want people killing each other, lying about each other, gaining advantage. I think there is demonic forces at work in the world, and I do believe that any read of the gospel is that Jesus has triumphed over the spiritual authorities and powers that have kept people down and held them in ignorance and darkness. And I think that's part of the good news is like, hey, we don't have to submit to the demonic powers that are holding people in this kind of like posture of violence and deceit. And Jesus is more powerful. And anyway, I've just been challenged by that. Reading The City of God is that I think whether it's the Enlightenment or what, we're just too quick to dismiss that there are forces of demons that are trying to keep, let's just face it. You turn on the news, it's just people yelling at each other. And, okay, I'm not against discussing the politics of the day or the issues of the day and trying to think about what would be a good perspective to have. But that's not what our media is trying to do right now. It sells more if it inflames fear and anger.
Yeah.
It just sells more. And we already know our broken hearts are naturally drawn to that. And the demons are smart enough to know that too.
Right.
So there are spiritual forces of darkness that want to maximize the worst of our humanity. And Jesus, I think, is trying to work to give people a new heart.
I would take that even a step further to say those guys like Tyler Robinson, and I forget the young man who stepped into the school and killed children, just a couple of weeks ago. To say, I think there's demon possession there, but that's not the big deal I want to make. The big deal I want to make is that there are people in my life. There's a young man lives on my street. He is troubled. I can see it. Right. I don't have to look very far to see that he is a troubled young man. I don't step into his life. My life is so busy and so full. I have not stepped into his life and said, hey, would you like to get together and talk about, scripture, do a Bible study together. Have you ever heard it? Because I know he's never gone to church in his life, And so for me, for the call for the church is not just, I love what you're saying, but even to go further to say, how do we battle those evil forces? How do we step into somebody like Tyler Robinson's life and and
Amen.
whisper and speak
Love
into
it.
his life, God loves you. And that's going to prevent that evil spirit from being able to take, because he's vulnerable, he's hurting. And so then the evil is,
Right.
he's open to that evil.
So now this is important because I think the demonic evil spirits want us to hate that young man on your street. They want us to be afraid of him.
And it would be easy to do
reject
that.
him.
He's difficult.
Right. Okay.
Write
But
him
actually,
off,
I think Jesus, through the gospel, first of all, makes us realize there's nothing better about me than him. In fact, I'm probably worse than him. If Jesus had left me alone, if he hadn't come to rescue me, I'd be worse off than that young man, whoever we're talking about now. But because of what Jesus has done, and he's freed me and he's released me, and even I'll put it this way, given a spiritual authority, we're not afraid of that young man. In fact, we know we're called to bring the light into his darkness.
And are we in tune with the Spirit to hear those nudgings? Were there people that the Spirit nudged in Tyler Robinson's life that didn't follow it
Right.
and didn't step into his life?
And so this is why it's important for the church to speak to events like this, because we actually need to rally the church to not be pulled into the hate, anger, and fear that is going to drive our nation at this event, but to be sort of have a crystal clarity about the gospel of Jesus and the need right now to step into a dark world that needs us so much.
There's so much to talk about here.
We better get to the topic we
Yeah.
gathered for.
Okay. Now that we've dealt with that.
No, hold on. We're not going to move on. There's two things I want to talk
A
about.
lot more to say.
Yeah, there's just so much. And I think people want to hear this. Let me just preface that. I want to hear this. I think that people want to hear this. How do we combat that? How do we combat that fear, hate, the proclivity to want to distance ourselves from that side who murders, or we caricature them and we don't see them as image bearers of Christ, as you say, and through our pain and suffering and judgment, or at least feeling judged, how do we combat that side of ourselves into bringing the gospel towards the other side, or towards they're not our enemy, but our enemy. You know what I mean? Like, how do we fight that within ourselves? What are some practical steps, or what are some values that we need to grasp of, or what are some framework a paradigm shift in our brain that we need to understand that?
I think that one of the biggest things for me that comes to mind is having conversations with people who have a very different perspective than we do. Because it's always amazing, right? We can rant about somebody when they're not in the room, and we can get really upset. But when we sit down and actually speak to them, our attitude and the way we approach is very different.
The unfortunate thing is that's what this guy Charlie Kirk was trying to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm just playing the other side here. That's what that's what we try to do, and they shot us. So why should I? You know what I mean? Like, that is the mentality, right? That's of someone would have. How do I fight even that?
No.
That's what someone would think. This is
I know.
this
I
is
know.
the-
I
this
know.
is the
I'm not
pulse.
saying they don't think it, but I'm responding no, because even Charlie Kirk's own mission himself was to have a respectful engagement with people who were very different. So, I don't know. Let's just say somehow or another that you feel to yourself like, okay, I want to somehow do something. I want to honor his legacy. Well, don't become violent and fear-driven and shut people out.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. What came into my mind when you asked the question at first was Jesus' parable of the sheep and goats. You know, when Jesus returns with all his angels with him, he's going to divide people like sheep and goats, and he's going to put the sheep on the right, and he says, you know, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I needed clothes, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you came to visit me. When I was sick, you came to take care of me. And then they're going to ask, oh, when did we, give you food and give you water and come and visit you? And anyway, to the goats, he's going to say, okay, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me anything to drink. When I was sick or in prison, you didn't come to visit me. And anyway, of those 6 different things, the one that immediately came into my mind was Christians are those who will even go to prison to visit people. Okay? Who's in prison?
Criminals.
Yeah, it's okay. People are in prison. They've done something horrible. They have victims. And what do Christians do? They realize, hey, I'm actually no better than any other criminal, and these people here need Jesus as much as I do. And maybe they're not going to be released from prison. That's not my concern. Jesus didn't say, when I was in prison, you sprung me out. Just went and visited him. So we don't have to, it's not like we're opening food banks and digging wells. We're just, oh, you're hungry here. Oh, you need some clothes. There you go. I was sick or I was in prison. You came to visit me. And I think Christians are those who are willing to go to uncomfortable places like prisons or hospitals. If people are sick, the problem with going to the hospital is you yourself might get sick. But Christians are like, you know what? Christ is more important. My life means nothing compared to that. So I'm willing to give up my life to be with somebody who might give me a disease that caused the end of my life. We're not afraid of death anymore. We're not afraid of whatever because of what Jesus has done for us. We're willing to cross over places where other people aren't willing to go. And, man, how is society going to be fixed if we just leave the criminals in a place where they're going to become more criminal, where they're going to become more desperate? Yeah. No, we need somebody to go over with a new message, a new heart, a new whatever. And Christians are the ones who are willing to do it because of what Jesus has done for us. So I guess that's my basic take, which is no. We're not going to retreat in fear and anger and forget them. That's not the Christian response.
This could be even taken on different levels, right? So on the health level, someone who's sick and you go to them and with no regard for your own health and it's okay. The gospel is more important than my life. Or it could be the gospel is more important that they should understand Jesus than my anger or, whatever wrong they've done to me. Or even if a kid's listening, it's better than social death, right? Like if I align myself or start talking to people that people don't like and people might think badly about me because they did the same with Jesus, like socially it doesn't matter either. So on multiple levels, that's a deep and profound thought and value that we need to grasp hold of more. You wanted to add something? And
it's not just I just was reflecting as Scott was talking, that it's not just the message that we bring. We bring a message of peace and a message of hope and a kingdom where there is justice. And it's more than just those words. It's living as if we're already in that kingdom. Putting ourselves in places where we're not comfortable. We're talking to people that we may not be comfortable talking to, but we're also loving people in sometimes dangerous situations, and that's the master that we follow in the person of Jesus.
I think it's it's important to not see these people as enemies, but we do have an enemy. This is the second thing I wanted to talk about. You brought up this idea of demons and demonic powers at work. And like I said, this whole paradigm of the poets at first, or the entertainment or the media, and then the academics, that strata, and then the politicians, that strata. They were all finding it, convenient or useful to them or beneficial to them to perpetuate these lies. What are the demonic powers at work now? What should we be aware of now? How should we be thinking about that? And as a Christian, how do we think about this cultural narrative, and how do we cling to the gospel in the middle of what is a world full of lies and demonic powers at work even against us and the church?
So your question is, what are the demonic powers?
Yeah, I guess what are the demonic powers? How is that perpetuated? When I just think about demonic powers in the world now, I'll look at the music and okay, so these people are pretending they're the devil now. Okay, that's cool. And then you go into academics, and they're perpetuating different lies about, I mean, just you name it. I mean, it's all over the place. And then the politicians use it to control power. Like this whole paradigm is interesting. I need to read this book, right? So this whole thing is interesting. And then so that is culture in a sense, right? All of that is
That's
now
right.
the summation of culture. How does a Christian walk through it? What do we need to be aware of? What should we be equipped with? Yeah.
One of the ones that's on my mind that comes to the forefront right away, especially in the context of Charlie Kirk, is, we mentioned fear and anger. And I think a lot of the fear and the anger is tied to nationalism. That it's often our country is going to fail, right? And here's what's going to happen. We're losing jobs. We're losing, there's violence in the streets. There's all of these things. We need to rebuild. It's an idealism of nationalism. And it's a subtle, I think Christians are susceptible to this in many ways, but it's a subtle move from Christianity to now Christianity is tied to the nation that I'm a part of. We lose a global perspective of Christianity. We lose a global perspective of the kingdom, and it's easy to get drawn into that.
Yeah.
And that's not the only one out there, but I think that's one that's really prominent. And I think the more we emphasize the kingdom of God and the gospel at the center of that, the more we take a step back from all of the things that try to draw us into this nationalist agenda.
And that might feed into a lot of different other lies here too, right? So it might make us more jaded or more angry when we don't need to be, less forgiving when we need to be more forgiving.
Yeah.
And we forget that we're a citizen of heaven before we're a citizen of anything else.
Well, and I think to use a picture I heard recently is, if we keep the kingdom at the forefront, we put the flag at the foot of the cross. But if we get drawn into nationalism, we want to drape the flag over the cross, And I think that's a dangerous move. But it's one that a lot of us have fallen prey to.
How about yourself?
I guess I have another kind of way of coming at this. So, yeah, for those people who know me pretty well, you know that I've sort of had the Psalms overtake my life, if I can put it that way. And recently I've been reflecting on the Psalms of Ascent. And it's interesting because Psalm 120 is the first Psalm of Ascent. And it basically starts with, I'll just call it like a thread of discontent. The person who wrote that psalm basically is like, God, please deliver me from all the deceiving tongues and lying lips. I basically am just so sick of living in a culture of lies and deceit. I'm for peace. Everyone else is for war. When I say I'm for peace, everyone wants to go to war. So the psalmist is actually reflecting on like, man, my culture is riddled with lies, and everyone is violent, and I want to be something else. And it's interesting because he talks about living in the tents of Kedar and Meshach, and if you don't know anything about it, first time I read through the psalm, I'm like, where are those places? I mean, they're not, and they're like the boondocks. Man, I'm living out here with a bunch of out in the boondocks in tents with a bunch of malcontents. The point is, I can't stay here. I can't keep living here with all these lies, with all this deceit, with all this violence. And the psalm actually raises discontent. The following psalm is a psalm we all know. It's Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And it's interesting because there's first a discontent. I can't stay here. And then there's a lifting up the eyes and be like, that's where I need to go. And you kind of have this vision for something else. and you're drawn to the beauty of a God who, if I take off on this journey, God's not going to let my feet slip back. He's not going to be asleep. I'm not going to stumble. He's going to watch over me. The sun's not going to get me by day. The moon's not going to get me by night. Like, God's going to help me on this journey as I leave behind this culture of lies, wickedness, and deceit and move towards something else. And I don't know, I just find there's something compelling about both. Like, I can't stay here. It starts with that. And I think it's interesting because this is the Psalms of Ascent. And every time Israel God's people went on a journey to go to Jerusalem, they take up these Psalms. And the first song was like, can't stay here. Gotta go there. Mm-hmm. And I think like maybe this incident with Charlie Kirk is helping people go, you know what? I'm sick of, all our poets, the media, music, movies, the news, the internet. I can't stay here. Yeah. Living with all these violent people who just have angry responses and want to lie all the time and keep people in darkness. I got to leave. And then, catch a vision. There's where my help is. My help is from the Lord. He's the maker of heaven and earth. And if I give my life to him, I'm not going to go wrong. He's going to watch over me, both by day and by night, and I'm going to get to the destination. Anyway, Psalm 122 then is it's also a famous psalm. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. And it says, our feet are standing in your gates, O Jerusalem. And it's celebrating, now I'm in the presence of God. And, there's something. So anyway, I'm just kind of taken up by these Psalms of Ascent lately and the journey. I think there's something about our cultural moment. I think there's people who are I can't stay here. I'm done with this. I'm not going to put up with a lying media, with academics that are trying to turn me and my family away from God, and politicians who want to keep us divided and angry at each other.
Yeah.
I'm not for war. I'm for peace.
Yeah.
And that's all.
I think reflecting on what you're saying, for me, it seems as though on Sunday it was very fitting or helpful for me, because there's the first song that we sang the refrain was the Lord reigns, right? Yep. The Lord reigns, the Lord reigns, the Lord reigns. It's
Psalm 93.
Psalm 93. And I found that helpful because I was able to lift my eyes up higher than what was all that was happening ground level. And lifting your eyes up, catching a vision of, you said that there's a vision better, like a better, better reality or better life that God has for us. But I found a lot of comfort in seeing that, okay, God's reigning still. So there's an already not yet, to use that term, that there's already a reign that's happening, that God is reigning right now. But there is a vision for something future, something greater for a Christian, that this life is not all there is. So there's a current peace and the ability to have a lot of patience during times of trouble, and still a future hope when there's something yet to come. Thanks, guys, for this segment on, current events, and I think what is close to the heartbeat of people around here. Do you guys have anything left to close? If someone's still feeling some kind of heavy-hearted, any?
No, I love Scott's finish, and it just called me to say, am I casting that vision for the kingdom? Am I casting that vision so that when people come on a Sunday, that they hear that vision of a better place, not a mythical, political lies place, but a real place that Jesus has established through his death and resurrection.
Yeah. All right. Can we do this? I'm going to send Psalm 120 to Jake, and let's just listen to it. When I say I'm going to send it, I'm going to send the link. Maybe you'll find it already, Jake. I don't know. You might be faster than I am. So this is my thought, which is he's going to play it. You're going to hear it in music, which I think is the native habitat of the Psalms, is to hear it in music. We're used to just listening to it read, but I'd like you to just listen to the words. And can we just end by reflecting on what this psalm says?
call on the Lord in my distress, and He answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will He do to you? And what more besides? You deceitful tongue. He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom bush. I call on the Lord in my distress, and He answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongue. Woe to me that I dwell in my shed, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak they are for war. I call on the Lord in my distress, and He answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues.
Yeah, and in that song, it's very the melody's matching with the words. So like when you read it, you don't really catch like the heartache of it until you, well, at least for me, I'm catching the that softer melody. And I initially think about the removal of things in my life, right? Like I'm so tired of all this. I want peace. And there's a growing movement of people, I think, who want to retreat and go into farming or living on a ranch. Or there's for us, I can't live on a ranch. I'm not good with animals or wild stuff. So I want to remove myself from like technology and all the voices in my head. So there's like this getaway type of movement, whether it's physical or digital. I mean, I get that.
Yeah, and this is where I think like there's first this statement of discontent. And it's interesting because in the psalm, and I didn't mention this, he talks about how, what more is God going to do to you, O lying lips? He's got flaming arrows, and he's got the hot coals of a broom tree coming at you. Like, he realized, like, God's judgment is coming on all this, and I cannot stay and be a part of this anymore. There's this discontent. Well, I think that's not quite enough. That's where the next psalm comes in, because, like, we could, okay, I'm living with a bunch of hillbillies. That's the Meshach and Kedar. Man, I'm living with a bunch of hillbillies here. I think I'll just move further away from them.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. I think there's actually a journey where you're setting out and you lift your eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord. And I think that's really the movement in these Songs of Ascent. But yeah, the reason I want to play it is, I don't know, there's something about that song that has captured my attention too. And I do think if you just read it, you might not catch what the melody catches like. There's like a sadness and a discontent.
Yeah, I listened to this one podcast recently, the Joe Rogan podcast. This guy, he was a Christian, and he wants to just get away from it all. He wants to live in the woods. He talks about how the air is so crisp, and there's less noise, and he feels so much better about himself. And it's one of those things where he's trying to remove himself from all this noise, but being Christian, he's also lifting his eyes up like, hey, there is something more to just removing myself. Like spiritually, I need to be in touch with God, and that brings me back to people. And it's just I think that's another pulse on culture that I'm aware of, at least.
Andrew Jackson had an agrarian vision for our country. That was he did not like all of the railroads,
Cities and all that stuff.
technology.
Steam,
He had an agrarian vision for our culture.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where we're not of this world, right? And but we're called to live in it. So, well, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. We'll probably release a part 2 of this one. If you guys are interested in further episodes, there's a pre-podcast where we talk about grandchildren. You could go on Patreon for that. Please subscribe. We're trying to get to 500, and we'll see you in the next episode.
The future is now.